Have you ever noticed that the more books you read on self-improvement, the more flawed you feel? Or how your meditation practice has somehow become another thing to feel guilty about when you miss it? What if I told you that the path you're walking to become better might actually be keeping you stuck? The self-improvement journey starts so beautifully, doesn't it? That moment when you discover a new podcast or book that resonates with something deep inside you. The little spark of hope that whispers, things could be different. I remember feeling that exact flutter in my chest when I picked up my first mindfulness book. But somewhere along the way, something shifts. The practices that once felt like gifts begin to feel like obligations. The insights that once liberated us start to feel like evidence of how far we still have to go. And the journey that began as an act of self-love quietly transforms into subtle self-rejection. This is the shadow side of self-improvement that we rarely talk about. How our genuine desire to grow can sometimes become the very thing that keeps us feeling like we're never quite enough. Can I share something a bit embarrassing? Last year, I had 5 different journals going at once. A gratitude journal, a dream journal, a regular journal, a habit tracker, and an insights from therapy journal. I was spending so much time documenting my growth that I barely had time to, actually grow. And then there was that phase where I tried to wake up at 5 a.m. because every successful person on YouTube swore by their morning routine. 3 weeks later, I was an exhausted mess who'd managed to make my coffee with hand soap instead of creamer. Twice. I see you nodding. We've all been there, haven't we? That moment when you realize you're following someone's 10 steps to inner peace while feeling anything but peaceful. Or when you catch yourself feeling guilty for not being grateful enough in your gratitude practice. The irony would be hilarious if it didn't also hurt a little. So what exactly is this trap that transforms our well-intentioned growth into another form of self-criticism? I've come to call it the better self paradox. The way our vision of who we could become actually creates disconnection from who we already are. The first sneaky manifestation is what I call improvement as identity. This happens when we become so attached to the journey of self-improvement that it becomes who we are. Our conversations revolve around the latest book we've read or technique we've tried. We bond with others over shared improvement goals. And while there's nothing inherently wrong with this, the danger comes when we start to need this identity to feel worthy. The question becomes, if I stopped actively trying to improve myself, who would I be? Would I still matter? Would people still find me interesting? This dependency on self-improvement as a source of value is the first warning sign that we've slipped into the trap. The second manifestation is someday syndrome. This is the subtle belief that life, real life, good life, exists on the other side of our improvement. When I finally master meditation, then I'll be present with my children. When I become more confident, then I'll pursue that dream. When I heal my relationship patterns, then I'll be ready for love. But here's the heartbreaking truth I've learned both personally and from sitting with hundreds of clients. Life only happens now. When we place our worthiness to fully experience life on the other side of our improvement, we miss the very moments that make life worth living. The third trap is metrics over meaning. Our culture loves measurable progress, steps counted, habits tracked, goals achieved. And while measurement can be useful, it can also disconnect us from the deeper purposes of our growth. I worked with a client who had faithfully maintained a meditation practice for 2 years, but realized she'd become more focused on maintaining her unbroken streak than on the practice itself. The metric had replaced the meaning, leaving her with the hollow achievement of consistency without the depth of presence she'd originally sought. Perhaps the most painful trap is what I call the horizonless journey. Self-improvement has no finish line. There is always another book to read, another habit to build, another aspect of self to heal or strengthen. Without intentional boundaries, this infinite path can lead to perpetual striving without ever allowing ourselves to arrive. The final, and perhaps most subtle trap is transformational bypassing. This occurs when we use self-improvement as a way to avoid the messy, painful parts of being human. Rather than allowing ourselves to fully feel difficult emotions or sit with uncomfortable truths, we quickly pivot to fixing them with our latest techniques or reframing them with our newest insights. What shocked me when I began researching this topic was discovering that psychologists have found a significant correlation between certain approaches to self-improvement and increased anxiety, perfectionism, and even imposter syndrome. One study found that people who engaged in self-improvement with an underlying belief that they needed fixing reported worse well-being than those who didn't pursue any self-improvement at all. And here's the statistic that stopped me in my tracks. The self-improvement industry is projected to reach $50 billion by 2025, reflecting our collective insecurity about not being enough. I'm curious about your experience with this. Have you ever found yourself trapped in the self-improvement cycle? What practices began with joy but eventually became another standard to measure yourself against? Share in the comments. Your insight might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Here's the liberating truth I've found. Real transformation isn't about becoming a better version of yourself. It's about coming home to who you've always been beneath the striving. The path isn't about improvement at all. It's about remembrance. So where does this leave us? Am I suggesting we abandon our growth entirely? Not at all. The journey of becoming is one of life's greatest gifts, but perhaps we can hold it differently. What if self-improvement wasn't about fixing what's broken, but about revealing what's already whole? What if growth was less about who you're becoming and more about who you're remembering you've always been? The antidote to the self-improvement trap isn't to stop growing, it's to change our relationship with growth itself, to pursue it from a place of self-friendship rather than self-criticism, to set down the heavy backpack of not enough yet, and walk more lightly with curiosity about who we already are. Because the most profound truth I've found is this: you are not a project to be optimized. You are a mystery to be lived. And in the space between who you think you should be and who you already are lies the most beautiful journey of all, the journey home to yourself. If this message resonated with something deep inside you today, I'd love to invite you to hit like and subscribe to join our community of fellow travelers who are learning to grow with gentleness. And if you're wondering what this balanced approach to growth actually looks like in practice, I've created several videos on my channel that dive deeper into personal development and self-growth strategies. Explore my other content for specific practices that will help you nurture your development without falling into these common traps. Finally, I want you to know that wherever you are on your journey right now is exactly where you need to be. Whether you're deep in the self-improvement cycle or taking your first steps toward a gentler relationship with growth, I'm honored to walk alongside you. Until next time, remember that you were never broken to begin with, and that truth is the ultimate self-improvement.